Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Pagemaster. Today we're going to be talking about Total Recall, not the 2012 remake, but the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Paul Verhoeven classic from the 90s. The book that we're going to be talking about is Tales from Development Hell, the Greatest Movies Never Made by David Hughes. Now, this one might be, I don't know exactly how long we're going to go. I'm going to try and keep it short because that's the whole point of doing this series. But we're going to talk about more than one story, more than one page. Actually, 4 pages with 4 brief stories that we want to discuss today. If you're unaware, you should check out Philip K. Dick, who's the author of the original story that Total Recall is based on. Philip K. Dick is a science fiction and sort of a paranoid, I want to say counterculture author who's had a number of works adapted into a number of movies, some of which have become cult classics and classics in their own right, and other ones which have become Hollywood trash. Adaptations of Dick's work include Blade Runner, Screamers, Minority Report, Imposter, with Gary Sinise. If you haven't seen, a lot of people haven't, that one's really cool. Paycheck, Scanner Darkly. Did I say Screamers? I might have said Screamers. This book is actually really great, and I might come back to it for future episodes. I mean, we're talking about John Borman's Lord of the Rings that never got made, Neil Gaiman's Sandman adaptation that never got made, Ridley Scott movies, Frank Miller stories, Darren Aronofsky, James Cameron. Don't be surprised if I reference this book in future episodes. For now, let's go to page 62. Our first story is going to be in the development of the adaptation the first time around. Screenwriter, I believe, and producer Ron Shusett, I think I'm just going to say Shusett, contacts Dan O'Bannon, who had recently done Dark Star, the first film with John Carpenter, and asked him to do a treatment on the script. So let's see what his thoughts are. Dick's story is short, he said. It ends very abruptly. You cannot take that particular story and simply inflate it up to a full-length piece. O'Bannon realized that the story was effectively a first act and that the second and third acts would have to be invented from scratch. Shusett liked what I did and asked, "Where does it go from here?" And I said, "We take him to Mars." The resulting script opens with the protagonist, Quail. The name was eventually altered to Quaid to avoid references to the then Vice President Dan Quayle, dreaming of a Martian pyramid of which he has no conscious memory. Quaid, Earth's top-secret agent, went to Mars and entered this alien compound. The machine killed him and created a synthetic duplicate. He is that synthetic duplicate, O'Bannon explained, and he cannot be killed because he can anticipate danger before it happens. The fact that this duplicate is invulnerable leads the government of Earth to a radical solution. Earth wants to kill him, but can't. That's why they go to all this trouble to erase his brain and make him think he's nobody. It's the only way they can control him. At the climax of the script, Quaid puts his hand on the Martian machine, at which point he achieves total recall, discovering his true identity, a Martian machine. He is, in effect, the resurrection of the Martian race in a synthetic body. He turns and says to all the other characters, "It's going to be fun playing God." O'Bannon's co-writer, however, wanted a more dramatic and externalized climax. Shusett and I never saw eye to eye on the end of the movie, O'Bannon admitted, adding, "The end that they filmed, in my estimation, is lame." It's actually a little bit ironic that O'Bannon was tapped to do this adaptation, considering that he had to take a short story and expand it, and that's kind of the quagmire he had just come out of with Dark Star, which was intended to be a 20-minute long short for film school and expanded to 55 minutes, and that sort of put them in an awkward position where a 20-minute short is a viable commercial entity and a 90-minute feature is also a viable commercial entity for film. And expanding it in the middle and injecting that much extraneous material was something that he struggled with, and it seems like in Total Recall he was facing the exact same proposition. Next we're going to be talking about David Cronenberg, who took a stab at doing an adaptation and possibly directing, but that didn't work out. Very quickly, he says, "So how would Cronenberg's Total Recall have looked? First of all, I really wanted to cast William Hurt," he says, "and the difference between Bill Hurt and Arnold Schwarzenegger probably tells you everything. I was going to do something that I thought was faithful to Philip Dick, and also to my own sense of the complex understanding of what memory is and what identity is. Obviously, it would have been science fiction, and you would have gone to Mars, but it would have been like Spider Goes to Mars," he adds, referring to his 2002 film starring Ralph Fiennes as a man struggling to piece his memories back together, as opposed to Raiders of the Lost Ark Goes to Mars. So now let's talk about a possible sequel that never got made. Then, in the early 1990s, Goldman optioned another Philip K. Dick story, Minority Report, with a view to directing it himself as a low-budget feature. He approached Verhoeven to ask if he would attach himself as executive producer, thus throwing the weight of his name behind the project, even if he was not directly involved. He read the short story, liked it, and agreed to help me out, and then he asked me if I thought about how well the story worked as a Total Recall sequel. Although it had nothing to do with the themes of the movie, there was something about the tone and driving narrative that made it seem perfect for a sequel. Better still, it did not repeat anything from the original film, allowing Goldman to take the franchise in a totally new direction, but one that would be thematically consistent with the original. This is what appealed to Paul, he says, the possibility of doing a sequel that seemed original, not repetitive or derivative. In Dick's story, certain human beings are born with telepathic powers, shunned by ordinary citizens, but embraced by the government as the foundation for a new anti-crime organization called the Pre-Crime Division, which uses the telepaths, known as precogs, to predict illegal activities before they occur and arrest the would-be criminals before any crime is committed. The plot revolves around a particular pre-crime detective forced to go on the run when the precogs spit out his name as a future murderer. As Verhoeven explains, there was an introduction in Total Recall that the mutants were perhaps clairvoyant, and that was used in the idea for the second one, where Quaid becomes the head of this company that can look into the future and protect citizens by eliminating criminals before they do crime. Thus, the mutants would become the precogs of Dick's story, the film rights to which Goldman now owned. And finally, we're going to do a quick rundown of the script treatment for a Total Recall 2 that got further. It's an original story. It's not an adaptation of Minority Report or any of other Dick's works. The Shusett-Goldman draft opens amid celebrations for Mars independence, with Quaid and Melina honored by President Gloria Palomares for their part in the struggle. Just as Quaid is about to give a speech, however, a double stabs him and takes his place. He wakes to find himself next to Melina. Only 3 weeks have passed since the events of Total Recall, and he is still among the Martian rebels. Independence from Mars is still a dream. They tell him of Project Whisper, a form of mind control being planned by President Serenan's government, and suggest delving into his mind to see if Hauser knows anything about it. Reluctantly agreeing to submit to the operation, he falls unconscious, only to wake up at Recall Incorporated, his wife Lori and Bob, the recall salesman, at his bedside, and Dr. Edgemar very much alive. They convince him that he has not left Recall since he began his vacation, yet events on Mars appear to have transpired largely as they occurred in Quaid's Recall trip. Mars has air, Cohagen is dead, a suspicious development, which Dr. Edgemar attributes to real-world news programs filtering into Quaid's virtual adventure. So, Mr. Quaid, Edgemar tells him, like all vacations, this one too comes to an end, and as usual we feel a little sad returning to the daily grind. Quaid returns home with Lori, only to be told that during the 6 months he was comatose at Recall, she began a new relationship with her personal trainer. Harvey Weinstein had a personal relationship with Sharon Stone, and they wanted to try to get her back into the franchise, Goldman explains. Dejected and financially dependent on Recall, Quaid finds a job on the construction site of a Seattle-based space elevator, one of Arthur C. Clarke's proposed constructs tethering an orbital space station to the Earth, allowing payloads to be transported cheaply to and from space. Meanwhile, an imminent presidential election draws Quaid's attention to an electoral campaign by Gloria Palomares, the president from his dream, denounced by her opponents as a mutant lover for promising to hold a referendum on Mars independence if she is elected. Torn between his feelings for Melina, whom he now believes to be a construct of Recall, and Renee, one of Miss Palomares' campaign volunteers, Quaid becomes involved with her political campaign, but is betrayed and framed for an explosion which wrecks the space elevator. Imprisoned for 6 months in a space prison known as Pasternak Institute for the Criminally Insane, he manages to escape and rejoins what remains of the rebels, who tell him of Melina's death. Posing as Hauser, Quaid heads to Vladivostok, where he is shocked to meet up with his own mother, whom he had thought long dead. Mrs. Hauser, evidently a Serenan sympathizer, sees through Quaid's deception, but although she threatens him, she knows that if she kills Quaid, her beloved Hauser will die too. Through his mother, Quaid discovers that Project Whisper is a planet-wide program designed to keep the electorate voting a certain way, thus keeping the next government, Serenan's, in power forever. After a gunfight with a dozen Laurie clones and his own mother, Quaid succeeds in destroying Project Whisper, an act which creates a vacuum, allowing a popular scene from Total Recall to be reprised, and ultimately leads to the election of Mrs. Palmera's and independence for Mars. He is about to make a speech when he sees Dr. Edgemar sitting in the front seat, but the next instant, he is gone. Did his eyes deceive him, or is he still back at Recall, dreaming of Martian independence? Alright, well that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Total Recall fans out there, 4 different possible tangent timelines of scripts and movies that could have been but were not produced.